Alrighty, NBA fans. Round 2 of the NBA playoffs officially start today with the Boston Celtics versus the Toronto Raptors. And just a few months ago, the words NBA playoffs seemed like something of the past, or they seemed of something of some fantasy land. So the fact that I'm able to say that round 2 of the playoffs start today is definitely something us NBA fans are thrilled about. And if you're not thrilled about it, then that just means you're a Knicks fan, and in that case, I think I can understand why. However, let's talk about the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors, because I think there is a lot to talk about in this series. I'm going to tell you guys who I think is going to win this series, and everything I say is going to be backed up by facts. And for anyone wondering, no, I am not a Boston fan. No, I am not a Toronto fan. I am a fan of the Los Angeles Lakers. And even though the Lakers and the Celtics don't have the best history, I promise I am not going to let any of that get in the way when I talk about the Celtics versus the Raptors, and you guys will see in just a minute. So if you guys appreciate that sort of honesty and unbiased opinion, if you wouldn't mind gently tapping the like button for the YouTube algorithm, that's all I ask for. Thank you all very much for doing that. And with that being said, who do I think is going to win this series and why? So first, let's take a look at what's happened between these two teams during the regular season. So far this season, the Toronto Raptors and Boston Celtics have faced off 4 times. And out of those 4 times, the Boston Celtics have won 3 of the matchups. However, one piece of information that I do not want to leave out is the fact that in 2 of those matchups, Pascal Siakam did not play. And in those matchups where Siakam did not play, each team won 1 of the games. And something else to note, ever since the NBA bubble started, the Toronto Raptors have only lost 1 game. And no, it wasn't to the undefeated Suns, it wasn't to the Lakers, to the Bucks, to the Clippers, it wasn't to any of those teams. It just so happened to be to the Boston Celtics. And it wasn't a close game either. The Boston Celtics beat them by 22 points. So with that being said, it looks like if you only look at the history between these 2 teams this season, it would lead you to think that the Boston Celtics are going to win this matchup. However, despite all of that, I still think the Toronto Raptors are going to win, and here's why. The first reason why I think the Toronto Raptors are going to win this series has to do with coaching. And look, don't get me wrong, Brad Stevens of the Boston Celtics is a phenomenal coach. In fact, I wish we had Brad Stevens as the coach of my Lakers instead of Frank Vogel. So that's saying something. However, when it comes to Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, I think Nick Nurse is just on a completely different level. When push comes to shove in the 4th quarter of a game or in overtime, I would trust whatever Nick Nurse says in the playoffs before I trust anything Brad Stevens says any day of the week. And once again, that's not to discredit Brad Stevens. I think he's a phenomenal coach. But when it comes to Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, especially in the playoffs, I gotta go with Nick Nurse any day of the week, and it's really not much of a debate. And what better example is there to give than the fact that Nick Nurse lost Kawhi Leonard, everybody wrote off the Toronto Raptors this year, and somehow Nick Nurse and the Toronto Raptors have figured it out, and this year they are championship contenders once again. And that's not to mention the fact that Nick Nurse just won Coach of the Year this year. And I could go on and on as to why I think Nick Nurse is a better coach than Brad Stevens, but that's not really the premise of this video. So why else do I think the Toronto Raptors are going to beat the Celtics in this series? No team in the entire NBA has better chemistry than the Toronto Raptors. Sure, they may not have the most star power, they may not have LeBron and Anthony Davis, they may not have Kawhi and Paul George, and with the way Paul George has been playing lately, I don't even know if the Clippers really have Paul George or what really is going on with him, so I don't know. But Kyle Lowry, VanVleet, and pretty much every other guy on that team is very, very good at playing with each other. In fact, I am confident in saying that no team in the entire NBA has better chemistry than the Raptors. And I've touched upon this in previous videos, so I'm not going to go too into depth on this right now, but the Toronto Raptors are masters of playing that next man up mentality. When one of their main players goes to the bench, or even if one of their main players isn't even playing that game, the Raptors do a great job of grabbing someone from the bench, putting him on the court, and making it all work. They mesh really well with one another, and that's something you really need in the playoffs. And a recent example of that is when the Raptors played the Bucks a few weeks ago, and Matt Thomas and Chris Boucher stepped it up. Each of them had 20-something points, besides the fact that Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, and a bunch of other guys didn't even play. And although I highly doubt that Nick Nurse is going to play a bunch of his depth in the playoffs, you can't deny the fact that the Raptors are a very deep team, and their games mesh very, very well with one another. So having that on your team is going to give any team an advantage, and the Raptors are fortunate enough to have players who can do that. But speaking of players who step up in the absence of other players, that leads me to my next point, which is the fact that Kyle Lowry might not play today. For anyone who may not know, Kyle Lowry recently came down with an ankle injury. And according to Nick Nurse, as of yesterday, Lowry went through practice and looked okay on Saturday. Lowry sprained his ankle against the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. So if I'm Kyle Lowry, I wouldn't even bother playing. And if I'm Nick Nurse, I wouldn't even let Kyle Lowry play today. First of all, it's only game 1. Worst case scenario, you lose game 1. I would much rather lose game 1 of the semifinals than have my star player play and potentially re-injure his ankle. If it was game 7 of the finals, then I would say, hey, go tape your ankle up and do what Luka did on a bad ankle to the Clippers. But it's only game 1 of the semifinals. If they happen to lose this game, it's not the end of the world. At least that'll give Kyle Lowry more time to get better, and they can still pull this series off in just a few more games. Now, besides the chemistry they have in their offense, something I find that's even more important for the Toronto Raptors, and something that is very underrated in the Raptors, is their defense. We all know the saying, offense wins games, but defense wins championships. Ask Joel Embiid, I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing.
Defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
To put it frankly, the Toronto Raptors are monsters on the defensive end. According to the NBA's website, the Toronto Raptors have the second highest defensive rating out of any team in the NBA. And not only is their team defense very good as a whole, but let's not forget the fact that they have elite defenders such as Norman Powell. Fred VanVleet is a very good defender. Siakam is a great defender. Ibaka is a very good defender. And Kyle Lowry, despite being in his 30s already, he is also a very good defender. And that's not to say that Boston isn't a good defensive team. Off the top of my head, I think they're 4th or 5th in defensive ratings in the NBA, so obviously they're a good defensive team. And yes, they have Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart is a good defender. Gordon Hayward is also a very good defender, but due to injury, Gordon Hayward isn't going to be playing. And this year, Gordon Hayward has been averaging 18 points per game. So I guarantee you the Boston Celtics are going to miss a guy who can drop 18 points and is one of their better defenders. And while we're on the topic of Gordon Hayward, I believe he and his wife are expecting a newborn son sometime within the next couple of weeks. Obviously, I don't know the exact date, but Gordon Hayward said he would leave the NBA bubble to go be with his wife if his son was going to be born during the NBA bubble time. So even if Hayward's ankle wasn't a problem, there's another reason as to why he might not be playing. But good for them, congratulations. So when you put all of that together, that is why I think the Toronto Raptors are going to come out ahead in this series. So I have the Raptors winning this series in 6 games. I don't think it'll go to 7, but I wouldn't be surprised if it only took the Raptors 5 games to close out this series. If you watched this video all the way through, please make sure to give it a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. Comment your thoughts down below. I want to know if you agree or you disagree with everything I said. And also hit that subscribe button if you're new. Whenever games are being played, I post a new video every single morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you want to stay in the loop on everything going on in the playoffs, please just make sure to hit that subscribe button once again. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm out of here. If you're still here, consider watching this other video I picked out for you down below. Please just watch it. I'm trying to get to 300 subs, so go watch that video. Let me know what y'all think. And hit the like button on that video too. All right, see you guys.